The morning sun cast long shadows across the Atacama Desert as Dr. Maria Santos adjusted the massive radio telescope for the third time that hour. She had been tracking the strange signals for 2 weeks now, ever since the Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up something that shouldn't exist according to every physics textbook ever written. "Still nothing?" asked her colleague, Dr. James Park, as he approached with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Maria shook her head, accepting the coffee gratefully. The signal stopped completely yesterday at 14:30 hours. Whatever was out there either moved away or the ground beneath their feet vibrated, not an earthquake tremor but something else entirely. Both scientists looked up at the clear morning sky and saw something that made them forget about their coffee entirely. 3 massive shapes hung motionless above Earth, each one easily the size of Manhattan. The ships, because what else could they be, gleamed like polished silver in the sunlight. No engines were visible, no exhaust trails marked their passage through the atmosphere. They simply existed, defying gravity as if physics were merely a suggestion. Within hours, every government on Earth was in emergency session. Military satellites confirmed what ground observers already knew. The objects were artificial, clearly, designed by intelligence and completely beyond human technology. Panic spread through some populations while others celebrated what they believed to be humanity's first contact with alien life. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the briefing room beneath NORAD, studying the images displayed on the main screen. As Earth's lead xenobiology specialist and former military officer, she had been chosen to head the first contact team, if this day ever came. She never imagined it would happen during her lifetime. "The objects maintain perfect geostationary positions," reported Colonel Harrison, pointing at the display. "One over the Pacific, one over Europe, one over Africa. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the signals are heavily encrypted." "Any hostile actions?" Elena asked. "None detected. In fact, they seem to be going out of their way to appear non-threatening. Look at this." Harrison switched the display to show detailed scans of the nearest vessel. No visible weapon systems. The hull design uses curved, organic-looking lines. Even their approach was deliberately slow and predictable. Elena studied the alien ships. Graceful curves. Someone had put a lot of thought into making these vessels appear as peaceful as possible. "Any response to our communication attempts?" "That's the interesting part," said Dr. Rebecca Chen, the team's linguist. "About an hour ago, they started broadcasting in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and 37 other human languages. They want to talk." The message, when it finally came through clearly, was everything science fiction had promised, and nothing like humanity had expected. "Greetings, people of Earth. We are representatives of the Galactic Protection Alliance, a coalition of 12 species dedicated to safeguarding developing worlds throughout the galaxy. We come in peace, offering friendship and protection to your young civilization." The voice belonged to someone called High Protector Mel Anner, and it carried the kind of warm authority that made people want to trust it immediately. The message continued with an invitation for Earth's leaders to visit the flagship for formal first contact. Elena found herself aboard a small shuttlecraft 6 hours later, along with representatives from the United Nations, NASA, and the world's major military powers. The alien ship had provided the shuttle, a sleek, silent vehicle that moved through space as easily as a bird through air. The interior of the alien flagship surprised everyone. Instead of cold metal corridors and blinking computers, they found themselves in what looked like a cross between a cathedral and a healing center. Soft lighting emanated from the walls themselves. The air smelled faintly of flowers and carried an almost musical quality that made everyone feel calmer. "Welcome, friends from Earth," said High Protector Mel Anner, as she approached the human delegation. Elena's first thought was that the alien had been designed by a committee whose job was to make her appear as non-threatening as possible. Mel Anner stood about 7 feet tall but carried herself with a gentle grace that suggested no violence whatsoever. Her skin had a faint blue tint and seemed to glow softly from within. Her eyes were large and kind, the color of deep ocean water. When she spoke, her voice carried that same musical quality as the air around them. "I am High Protector Mel Anner of the Caridian people," she said, bowing slightly. It is my honor to welcome you into the larger community of galactic civilization. Behind Melanor stood representatives of the other Alliance species. The Zeph-Hai looked like living crystals that somehow moved and spoke in harmonious tones that sounded like wind chimes. The Verdani resembled walking trees with faces carved from bark, and they released calming scents that made everyone feel drowsy and peaceful. Elena introduced herself and the human delegation, trying to process everything she was seeing. These beings had clearly evolved on different worlds with different conditions, yet they all shared one common trait. They appeared completely harmless. "Please come with me," Melanor said, gesturing toward a large chamber filled with comfortable seating arranged in a circle. "We have much to discuss." The formal presentation began with a holographic display that showed the galaxy as the Alliance saw it. Thousands of star systems were marked in different colors: green for Alliance member worlds, yellow for developing civilizations under protection, red for dangerous areas to be avoided. "The galaxy is vast and filled with wonders," Melanor explained as the display rotated slowly. "But it is also filled with dangers that young civilizations like yours cannot imagine. Stellar predators that feed on the energy of entire suns, quantum storms that can strip away a planet's atmosphere in minutes, machine intelligences that view organic life as a resource to be harvested." Elena watched the presentation with growing interest. The threats Melanor described sounded impressive, but something about the way they were presented bothered her. The stellar predators looked more like space whales than monsters. The quantum storms appeared to be natural phenomena, like hurricanes or tornadoes. The machine intelligences seemed to be mostly automated mining operations that had lost their programming. "For over 2,000 years, Melanor continued, the Alliance has protected developing worlds from these threats. We offer you the same protection we have given to 847 other species across the galaxy." The holographic display changed to show peaceful worlds under Alliance protection. Happy populations living in harmony, their needs provided for by advanced technology. No wars, no disease, no hunger. Children playing in perfect safety while their parents worked at jobs that seemed more like hobbies than labor. "Our shield generators will surround your solar system," Melanor explained. "Nothing dangerous will be able to reach you. Our medical technology will eliminate disease and extend your lifespans far beyond what you currently experience. Our food synthesis systems will end hunger forever. Our educational programs will help your people reach their full potential." Elena noticed that Dr. Chen was taking extensive notes, but Colonel Harrison looked uncomfortable. The military representatives were exchanging glances that suggested they had questions. "The process is simple," Melanor said, her warm smile never wavering. "You need only accept our guidance and allow us to relocate any problematic populations to safer worlds where they can be properly cared for." "Problematic populations?" Elena asked. "Some civilizations develop certain aggressive tendencies during their evolution," Melanor explained gently. "These individuals often have difficulty adapting to peaceful galactic society. We have special facilities where they can live comfortably while learning to control their violent impulses." Elena felt a chill despite the warm, flower-scented air. "And if they don't want to be relocated?" Melanor's expression remained kind, but something flickered behind her large eyes. "The safety of the majority must always take precedence over the desires of a few, Captain Vasquez. Surely you understand this principle from your own military experience." The presentation continued for another hour, covering everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs. The Alliance had clearly done this many times before. Every question the humans asked had been anticipated. Every concern had a prepared answer. But Elena noticed something interesting. While Melanor spoke about protection and guidance, she never mentioned partnership or equality. The relationship being offered was clearly that of parent to child, protector to protected. Humanity would be safe, but they would not be free. When the presentation finally ended, Melanor looked expectantly at the human delegation. "Do you have any questions about our offer?" Elena glanced at her colleagues and saw her own thoughts reflected in their faces. This was the moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. She could accept the Alliance's protection and condemn her species to eternal childhood, or she could ask the questions that were burning in her mind. "High Protector," Elena said carefully, "we appreciate your generous offer. But I have to ask, what exactly are you protecting us from that's so dangerous we need to give up our independence?" Melanor's smile faltered slightly. Several of the other alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. "The galaxy is full of terrors, Captain," Melanor said, her voice carrying a note of condescension. "Threats that your primitive technology could never hope to address. Your species has barely left its own solar system. You fight with chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles like children playing with dangerous toys." Elena felt her colleagues tense behind her. Dr. Chen stopped taking notes. Colonel Harrison's hand moved unconsciously toward where his sidearm would normally rest. "So stellar predators, quantum storms, and rogue mining equipment," Elena said, her voice remaining perfectly calm. "That's it? Dangerous weather and some broken machines? I assure you these threats are far more serious than—" "We were hoping for something more challenging," Elena interrupted, and for the first time since boarding the alien ship, she smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm smile. In fact, there was something predatory about it that made several of the Alliance representatives take an unconscious step backward. Elena had spent 15 years in military service before joining the xenobiology program, and some habits died hard. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Elena continued, her smile growing wider. "You see, High Protector, you've been looking at this situation backwards. You're worried about protecting us from the galaxy's dangers. What you should be asking is whether the galaxy needs protection from us." The silence that followed was broken only by the musical humming of the ship's systems. Melanor stared at Elena with an expression that suggested she was seeing humans clearly for the first time. "Captain Vasquez," Melanor said slowly, "surely, you don't mean to suggest that your species poses a threat to galactic civilization?" Elena's smile never wavered. "High Protector, we've been imagining scary scenarios and building weapons to fight them since before we discovered fire. The only difference is that now we know we're not alone in the universe." She stood up, followed by the rest of the human delegation. "We'll need some time to consider your generous offer. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to review some of our own technical specifications, just so you understand what you're dealing with." Dr. Chen activated a small device that transmitted a data package to the Alliance ship's computers. The information contained detailed analyses of human military capabilities, theoretical weapon systems, and strategic doctrines that had been developed over millennia of constant warfare. As the alien representatives began reading the data, their expressions changed from confusion to concern to something approaching fear. "The thing is," Elena said as she headed toward the exit, "you've spent 2,000 years protecting species from external threats. Humans spent most of our history being the threat." The last thing she heard as the shuttle bay doors closed behind them was the sound of Alliance representatives arguing in several different alien languages, their musical voices carrying notes of panic and discord. During the flight back to Earth, Elena stared out at the 3 massive alien ships hanging motionless in the sky and wondered what humanity's response would ultimately be. The Alliance offered safety and comfort in exchange for freedom and independence. It was the same bargain countless species had accepted across the galaxy, but humans had never been particularly good at accepting other people's definitions of safety. As the shuttle touched down at the secure facility in Nevada, Elena made a mental note to recommend that Earth's response include a complete inventory of human weapons capabilities, not as a threat, but as a courtesy. After all, it was only polite to let the Alliance know exactly what they were dealing with. 2 weeks had passed since first contact, and the 3 Alliance ships still hung motionless above Earth like silver monuments to humanity's new place in the galaxy. Every news channel on the planet ran constant coverage of the great decision that world leaders were supposedly making in secret sessions. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the underground command center beneath Geneva, watching real-time feeds from a dozen different monitoring stations. The aliens had been patient so far, but their daily requests for humanity's answer were becoming more frequent and more pointed. The analysis teams have finished their reports, said Dr. James Chen, Elena's new science advisor. He was Dr. Rebecca Chen's brother, and had been pulled from his position at MIT to help evaluate Alliance technology. You're going to want to see this. Elena accepted the thick folder with some reluctance. Reading technical reports had never been her favorite part of leadership, but the last 2 weeks had taught her that every detail mattered when dealing with species that had been manipulating galactic politics for over 2 millennia. The short version, James said, settling into a chair across from her desk, is that Alliance technology is impressive but not revolutionary. Their ships use gravity manipulation for propulsion, which is beyond us right now. But their weapons and defensive systems are actually quite limited. Limited how? They're designed exclusively for non-lethal suppression. Energy fields that disable rather than destroy. Weapons that incapacitate rather than kill. It's like they've never encountered an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or sedated into submission. Elena flipped through pages of technical diagrams and analysis charts. What about their protection protocols? The operations they've conducted to defend other species? James grimaced. That's where it gets interesting. We requested historical data on Alliance military operations under the guise of wanting to understand what we'd be protected from. They gave us everything. Detailed records of 847 successful integrations over the past 2,000 years. And their success rate is terrible. When the Alliance protects a species, they win about 77% of the time. The other 23% result in what they call unfortunate relocations. Entire planetary populations moved to safer worlds that happen to be rich in resources the Alliance needs. Elena set down the folder and leaned back in her chair. They're not protectors, they're farmers. That's essentially our conclusion, yes. They find developing species, offer protection, and either succeed in making them dependent clients or fail and harvest their populations and resources. Either way, the Alliance benefits. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Elena's assistant appeared on the wall screen with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Captain, High Protector Mel Anner is requesting another meeting. She says the Alliance Council is eager to finalize the protection agreement. Tell her we'll be happy to meet, Elena said. But this time we want to tour their facilities and observe their protection protocols in action. Full transparency. 3 hours later, Elena found herself aboard the Alliance flagship again. But this time she wasn't alone. The human delegation had grown to include military analysts, xenobiologists, computer specialists, and, to the aliens' obvious discomfort, several weapons experts. Commander Sarah Torres had been Elena's choice to lead the military assessment team. Sarah had spent 12 years in special operations before joining the Space Force, and she had a talent for seeing tactical weaknesses that others missed. She also had an unsettling way of smiling that made people nervous. Welcome back, Captain Vasquez, Mel Anner said as she greeted the expanded human delegation. I must admit, your request for operational transparency is somewhat unusual. Most species are content to accept our assurances of protection. Most species probably haven't spent their entire evolutionary history fighting each other, Elena replied pleasantly. We like to understand exactly what we're getting into. Mel Anner's expression suggested she was beginning to understand that humans were not like other species she had encountered. Very well. I will personally guide you through our defensive capabilities and show you recordings of recent protection operations. The tour began in what the Alliance called their Strategic Operations Center, a vast chamber filled with holographic displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were monitored constantly, with threat assessments updated continuously by advanced artificial intelligence. Impressive, said Dr. Lisa Park, the team's computer specialist, as she studied the information displays. How often do you actually engage these threats? Fortunately, most can be deterred through diplomatic means, explained Zekthar, a crystalline Zephi who served as the Alliance's military coordinator. His voice sounded like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. When diplomacy fails, we implement containment protocols. Sarah Torres stepped closer to examine the tactical displays. Containment protocols? We establish defensive perimeters around threatened areas and deploy suppression fields to disable aggressive forces, Zekthar said proudly. Our technology allows us to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary destruction. Show us, Sarah said simply. What followed was a series of holographic recordings showing Alliance forces in action against various galactic threats. Elena watched with growing amazement as the aliens fought like they were trying to solve a humanitarian crisis rather than win a war. In the first recording, Alliance ships faced off against something called a stellar predator, a massive creature that fed on solar radiation. The Alliance response was to surround the creature with energy fields and guide it away from inhabited systems, using what appeared to be sophisticated herding techniques. Remarkable, said Dr. James Chen. How long did this operation take? Approximately 6 weeks, Zekthar replied. We had to be careful not to harm the creature, as stellar predators are an endangered species. 6 weeks, Sarah repeated, her voice carefully neutral. To deal with one animal. The second recording showed Alliance forces engaging a swarm of automated mining ships that had somehow lost their programming and begun consuming inhabited asteroids. The Alliance response was to board each ship individually and attempt to reprogram their control systems. This operation required 4 months to complete, Zekthar noted. Unfortunately, we were unable to save 3 of the asteroid colonies before restoring proper programming to the mining fleet. Elena watched Sarah's face carefully and saw something that worried her. Sarah was smiling, but it was the kind of smile she had worn during combat briefings in Afghanistan. The expression of a predator analyzing prey. Could we see some of your less successful operations? Elena asked. The ones that resulted in relocations? Melanor and Zekthar exchanged glances before calling up new recordings. These showed Alliance forces attempting to protect worlds from threats they couldn't contain or redirect. The patterns were consistent. The Alliance would deploy defensive measures, attempt diplomatic solutions, and gradually fall back as their gentle methods proved inadequate. The Vorthon situation was particularly challenging, Melanor explained, as they watched Alliance ships retreating from a swarm of aggressive biomechanical entities. The Vorthon Collective refused all diplomatic contact and seemed determined to consume organic matter for some unknown purpose. What happened to the Vorthon? Elena asked. We were forced to relocate the entire species to a secure facility where they could be properly studied and hopefully rehabilitated, Melanor said sadly. It was a tragic necessity. Commander Torres leaned forward, studying the tactical display with professional interest. How many Vorthon were there originally? Approximately 4 billion individuals across 12 worlds. And how many survived the relocation? Melanor hesitated. The relocation process is difficult for some species to adapt to. Perhaps 40 million Vorthon are currently in our care. Sarah's smile disappeared entirely. You killed 90% of their population and called it a rescue operation. We saved who we could. Zekthar's musical voice carried a note of distress. The alternative was to allow the collective to spread throughout the sector, consuming everything in their path. Or you could have just destroyed them, Sarah said, matter-of-factly. Quick, clean, permanent solution. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the ship's systems. Every Alliance representative in the room was staring at Sarah with expressions of horror. Commander Torres, Melanor said carefully, surely you don't mean to suggest that genocide is preferable to relocation. I'm suggesting that if you're going to kill 4 billion people anyway, you should be honest about it, Sarah replied. At least genocide is quick. Elena decided it was time to intervene before Sarah said something that ended negotiations entirely. What Commander Torres is pointing out is that your methods seem designed to make you feel better about the outcome, rather than actually protecting the species involved. We save who we can, Melanor insisted. We are not warriors, Captain Vasquez. Violence is not in our nature. No, Elena agreed, but it's in ours. She activated a portable display device and called up the files that Earth's military analysts had prepared over the past 2 weeks. Since you showed us your operations, let us show you how humans would handle the same situations. The first file was a tactical analysis of the Stellar Predator incident. Human weapons experts had identified 17 different ways to either kill or permanently relocate the creature in less than 48 hours. Methods ranged from gravity weapons that would drag the predator into a nearby black hole to exotic matter bombs that would disrupt its ability to process solar radiation. These solutions are unnecessarily violent, Zekthar protested. The Stellar Predator is a living being. So are the billions of people on the worlds it threatens, said Dr. Park. We prioritize the lives of civilized beings over the lives of animals. The second file showed human solutions for the automated mining problem. Rather than attempting to reprogram each ship individually, human strategies involved using electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable the entire fleet simultaneously, then either reprogramming them en masse or simply destroying them and building new mining equipment. Time to resolution, 6 hours, Elena noted. Casualties, 0. The third file was Sarah's analysis of the Vorthon collective situation. Her solution was brutally simple. Deploy thermonuclear weapons to sterilize all 12 Vorthon worlds simultaneously, ensuring that the aggressive biomechanical entities could never spread beyond their home system. Total time to resolution 30 minutes, Sarah said. Collateral damage minimal. Long-term threat to galactic civilization eliminated. Mel Anner stared at the tactical displays with what Elena could only describe as horrified fascination. You would commit genocide to solve a military problem? We would eliminate an existential threat to galactic civilization, Elena corrected. The Vorthon collective was consuming organic matter and spreading to new worlds. They had to be stopped. Your method resulted in the deaths of 4 billion Vorthon and left 40 million of them imprisoned in your facilities. Our method would have resulted in the deaths of 4 billion Vorthon and guaranteed that the threat never spread beyond their home system. But the survivors. What kind of life are they living in your facilities? Sarah asked. Are they free? Are they happy? Are they still really Vorthon? Or are they just prisoners you've convinced yourself you're helping? The Alliance. Representatives had no answer for that. Dr. Chen activated another display showing humanity's theoretical weapons development over the past 50 years. The thing you need to understand about humans is that we've been preparing for hostile contact since we first started looking at the stars. We have contingency plans for fighting hive minds, swarm intelligences, energy beings, machine intelligences, and things we haven't even encountered yet. We've been imagining scary scenarios and building weapons to fight them for centuries, Elena added. Not because we're violent by nature, but because we learned early in our history that the universe doesn't care about your good intentions. The tour continued for several more hours, but the mood had shifted dramatically. Alliance representatives showed human delegates their food synthesis technology, their medical systems, and their educational programs with obvious pride, but they kept glancing nervously at the weapons experts who accompanied the group. As the Etai tour concluded, Melanar made one final attempt to emphasize the benefits of Alliance protection. Think of what we're offering you, Captain Vasquez. Perfect safety, unlimited resources, guidance from species with thousands of years more experience than you. Why would you choose the uncertainties of independence over the security we provide? Elena considered the question carefully before answering. Because security without freedom isn't security at all, High Protector. It's just a comfortable cage. She gathered her team and headed toward the shuttle bay, but paused at the doorway. We'll have an answer for you soon, but I think you should prepare yourselves for the possibility that humanity might have a different vision for galactic civilization than what you're used to. During the flight back to Earth, Sarah Torres reviewed the intelligence they had gathered. They're not evil, she concluded. They're just incompetent. 2,000 years of practice and they still fight like they're afraid of hurting the bad guys. The question is, Elena said, what do we do about it? Sarah's predatory smile returned. We show them how it's really done. The emergency meeting was called at 0347 hours, Geneva time. Elena Vasquez had been asleep for exactly 90 minutes when her secure communicator began screaming with priority alerts from Alliance monitoring stations across 3 different sectors of the galaxy. Talk to me, she said, pulling on her uniform as she strode toward the command center. The corridors beneath the UN complex were normally quiet at this hour, but tonight they buzzed with activity as analysts and specialists rushed to their posts. Dr. James Chen met her at the command center entrance, his face grim. The Alliance is in trouble. Big trouble. Something called the Skoran Empire has been launching coordinated attacks across Alliance territory for the past 6 hours. Elena stepped into the main operations room and immediately understood why everyone looked so worried. The massive display showed a three-dimensional map of Alliance space with red warning indicators spreading like cancer across multiple sectors. "How bad is it?" she asked. 12 Alliance worlds under direct attack, reported Commander Torres from her position at the tactical station. Another 37 have gone dark completely. Alliance Fleet Command is requesting emergency assistance from all member species and protectorates. Elena studied the tactical display with growing concern. The attacks weren't random. They followed a clear pattern that suggested extensive planning and coordination. Whoever these Skorans were, they understood Alliance weaknesses better than the Alliance understood them themselves. What do we know about the Skoran Empire? That's the interesting part, said Dr. Lisa Park, pulling up intelligence files on her workstation. According to Alliance records, the Skorans were classified as a developing militaristic species approximately 50 years ago. The Alliance has been monitoring them ever since, waiting for them to become a threat worth addressing. Apparently, they became a threat, Elena observed dryly. It gets worse, James said, activating additional displays. Alliance fleet doctrine is based on their historical experience with galactic threats, stellar predators, rogue mining equipment, quantum storms. They're not equipped to fight an organized military force that actually wants to win. Elena watched. Real-time feeds from Alliance ships engaging Skoran forces. The alien tactics were exactly what she had observed during their facility tour. Defensive formations designed to minimize casualties, non-lethal suppression fields, attempts at diplomatic contact even while under fire. The Skorans, by contrast, fought like they were trying to exterminate their enemies as quickly and efficiently as possible. Their ships moved in aggressive formations, concentrated overwhelming firepower on single targets, and showed no interest in capturing or converting Alliance forces. How are the Alliance forces holding up? They're not, Torres said bluntly. Casualty reports are sketchy, but it looks like they're losing approximately 3 ships for every Skoran vessel they manage to disable. And that's assuming they're actually disabling Skoran ships rather than just making them angry. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Elena wasn't surprised to see High Protector Melaner's face appear on the main screen, though the alien leader looked far less composed than she had during their previous meetings. "Captain Vasquez," Melaner said, her musical voice carrying notes of strain and exhaustion. "I hope you will forgive the urgency of this communication, but circumstances have evolved beyond our initial projections. We're monitoring the situation," Elena replied carefully. "How can we help?" Relief flickered across Melaner's features. "The Alliance Council has voted to grant Earth provisional membership status immediately, with full protection rights and obligations. We could use any assistance your people might be able to provide." Elena glanced at her staff before responding. "What kind of assistance are you looking for?" "Evacuation support, primarily. Our priority is saving as many lives as possible from the affected worlds. Your ships could help transport refugees to safer locations while our fleet focuses on containing the Skoran advance." Commander Torres leaned forward, studying the tactical displays with professional interest. "High Protector, what's your current assessment of Skoran military capabilities?" "They appear to be more advanced than our initial evaluations suggested," Melaner admitted. "Their weapon systems are designed for maximum destruction rather than suppression. They show no interest in diplomatic resolution or peaceful coexistence. Most disturbing of all, they seem to view the conflict as entertainment." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Entertainment? Skoran communications intercepts suggest they are competing among themselves to see who can cause the most destruction in the shortest time. They appear to consider our defensive strategies amusing rather than effective. The implications of that statement settled over the command center like a cold fog. Elena had encountered enemies who fought for resources, territory, ideology, or survival. But enemies who fought for fun were something else entirely. High Protector, Elena said carefully. What exactly is the Alliance's long-term strategy for dealing with this threat? Melaner hesitated before answering. We are adapting our protocols to address this unprecedented situation. Our xenobiologists are developing psychological profiles of Scoran leadership to identify potential diplomatic solutions. Our engineers are working on enhanced suppression technologies that might be more effective against their aggression. Our logistics specialists are calculating optimal evacuation routes for threatened populations. Elena translated that in her head. They had no idea what they were doing. In the meantime, Melaner continued, any assistance Earth could provide with refugee evacuation would be greatly appreciated. The Scorans seem particularly focused on populated worlds, and civilian casualties are mounting rapidly. Elena looked around the command center at her staff. Torres was practically vibrating with suppressed energy, like a hunting dog that had caught a scent. Dr. Chen was already pulling up files on human fleet capabilities. Park was running simulations on her workstation with the intensity of someone solving a particularly challenging puzzle. High Protector, Elena said. Evacuation support is certainly something we can provide. But I have to ask, have you considered alternatives to containment and evacuation? What alternatives? Elimination of the threat. Melanor's expression shifted to one of confusion mixed with something that might have been horror. Captain Vasquez, surely you're not suggesting that we engage in aggressive warfare against the Scoran Empire. I'm suggesting that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, Elena replied. If the Scorans are fighting for entertainment, then make the fight boring. If they're competing for destruction scores, change the rules of the game. I don't understand. Commander Torres stepped forward, her predatory smile making its reappearance. What Captain Vasquez is suggesting, High Protector, is that instead of playing defense and hoping the Scorans get bored, you eliminate their ability to threaten anyone ever again. But that would require war. Elena finished. Real war. Not the polite conflicts you're used to managing, but the kind of war that humans have been perfecting for thousands of years. Melaner was quiet for several long moments. Elena could see her struggling with concepts that probably violated every principle Alliance civilization was built on. The Alliance Council would never approve such an approach, Melaner said finally. We are protectors, not aggressors. And how's that working out for you? Torres asked bluntly. Before Melaner could respond, new alerts began flashing across the tactical displays. Dr. Park cursed quietly as she interpreted the incoming data. 3 more Alliance worlds just went dark, Park reported. Scoran forces are advancing faster than projected. At this rate, they'll reach core Alliance territory within 72 hours. Elena made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. High Protector, what if Earth handled the military response while the Alliance focused on evacuation and humanitarian support? I don't understand. Let us fight the Scorans. You save the civilians. We eliminate the threat. Melaner stared at Elena through the communication link with an expression of complete bewilderment. Captain Vasquez, Earth has never engaged in interstellar warfare. Your fleet consists of, perhaps a dozen ships? Elena's smile was just as predatory as Torres. High Protector, you might be surprised by what Earth has been building while you've been negotiating our protection agreement. She activated the command center's main display and called up files that had been classified above Alliance security clearance until this moment. The display showed Earth's actual military capabilities, not the primitive chemical rockets and kinetic weapons that humanity had allowed the Alliance to observe, but the true extent of human weapons development over the past 50 years. This is the CSV Indomitable, Elena said, highlighting the lead ship in humanity's real fleet. Mass, 2 million tons. Primary armament, gravimetric compression cannon capable of generating localized black holes. Secondary armament, quantum disruption, torpedoes that destabilize matter at the subatomic level. Defensive systems include adaptive armor that learns from incoming attacks and barrier fields that can deflect relativistic projectiles. The display scrolled through additional ship specifications, while Mel Anner watched in growing amazement. Humanity's actual fleet consisted of over 200 ships, each one designed according to principles that made Alliance vessels look like children's toys by comparison. "How is this possible?" Melanor whispered. "Your technology was classified as barely post-industrial." "We let you classify it that way," Elena explained. "Humans learned a long time ago that it's better to be underestimated than to be seen as a threat before you're ready." "Ready for what?" Elena's expression grew serious. "Ready to meet a hostile universe on equal terms." Dr. Chen activated additional displays showing human weapons technology that the Alliance had never suspected existed. Antimatter bombs capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Nanoscale weapons that could disassemble enemy ships at the molecular level. Mimetic warfare devices designed to attack artificial intelligences through their own communication networks. "We've been preparing for first contact scenarios for over a century," Elena continued. "Peaceful cooperation was always our preferred option, but we developed contingencies for every other possibility we could imagine. Including hostile empires that fight for entertainment," Torres added cheerfully. Mel Anner struggled to process what she was seeing. This level of weapons development, it would require centuries of constant warfare to perfect such technologies. "Humans have had centuries of constant warfare," Elena pointed out. "We just recently figured out how to stop fighting each other long enough to focus on external threats." The command center was quiet except for the soft humming of computer systems and the distant sound of activity in the corridors outside. Elena watched Mel Anner's face as the alien leader tried to reconcile her understanding of humanity with the evidence being presented. "Captain Vasquez," Mel Anner said finally, "if Earth possesses this level of military capability, why did you not simply reject our protection offer immediately?" Elena's smile softened slightly. "Because we wanted to understand who you really were before we decided what to do about you. The Alliance isn't evil, High Protector. You're just naive. You've been playing at warfare for 2,000 years while humans have been perfecting it. And now? Now you have a choice. Let us handle the Scorn problem while you focus on what you do best, helping people and building peaceful societies. Or continue trying to fight a war you don't understand against enemies who think your methods are hilarious." Mel Anner was quiet for a long time before responding. "What would you require from the Alliance? Information about Scorn positions and capabilities, coordination with your evacuation efforts, and formal authorization to engage in unrestricted warfare against the Scorn Empire." "Unrestricted warfare?" Elena's expression grew cold. "High Protector, if humans are going to war, we're going to win, whatever it takes, however long it takes, by whatever means necessary. The Scorns want to play games with galactic civilization? Fine, but they're about to learn that humans don't play games when innocent lives are at stake." The transmission ended with Melanor promising to present Earth's offer to the Alliance Council immediately. Elena knew the answer would be yes. The Alliance was out of options and running out of time. "Torres," she said, turning to her military commander, "how long before we can have the fleet ready for deployment?" Torres's predatory smile was back in full force. "The fleet's been ready since the day those Alliance ships showed up in our sky. Captain, we just need coordinates and authorization." Elena looked around the command center at her staff, scientists and soldiers who had spent their careers preparing for this moment without knowing if it would ever come. "Then let's go show the galaxy how humans really fight." The first human warship to engage Scorn forces was the CSV Retribution, a heavy cruiser that had been conducting navigation exercises near the Kepler system when the Alliance distress call came through. Captain Marcus Webb received authorization to engage 47 minutes before his ship detected the energy signatures of Scorn vessels approaching the civilian colony on Kepler Prime. "All stations, this is the captain," Webb announced over the ship's communication system. "We are about to engage hostile forces threatening Alliance civilians. This is not a drill. This is not a peacekeeping operation. This is war, and we will conduct ourselves accordingly." The crew of the Retribution had trained for this moment for years, but none of them had ever fired a shot in anger at an alien target. That was about to change. "Tactical, what are we looking at?" Webb asked as his ship moved into optimal firing position. 12 Scoran assault vessels approaching Kepler Prime from multiple vectors, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from the tactical station. "Alliance defenders are falling back. Colonial evacuation is approximately 30% complete." Webb studied the tactical display showing Alliance ships attempting to shield the evacuation transports, while Scoran forces closed in from all sides. The alien ships moved with the predatory grace of sharks circling wounded prey. "Their formation suggests they're planning to herd the evacuation ships into a kill zone," Kim continued. "Alliance defensive positions won't hold for more than 20 minutes. Time to intercept? 18 minutes at current speed." Webb made a decision that would define humanity's role in galactic warfare. "All ahead flank. Battle stations. Load gravimetric compression rounds, and prepare quantum disruption torpedoes for immediate deployment." The Retribution accelerated toward the battle zone with a velocity that would have been impossible for any ship using conventional propulsion. Human gravity manipulation technology was decades ahead of anything the Alliance possessed, and the Scorans were about to learn that the hard way. Meanwhile, in the Kepler system, Alliance Fleet Captain Hythlok watched his defensive formation crumble under Scoran assault. The crystal-based alien had commanded protection fleets for over 40 years, but he had never faced enemies who seemed to enjoy the destruction they caused. "Sir, Scoran forces are concentrating fire on evacuation transports," reported his tactical officer. "They're ignoring our warships entirely." Hythlok felt his crystalline structure resonate with frustration. The Scorans weren't trying to defeat Alliance forces. They were trying to maximize civilian casualties for some incomprehensible reason. Every standard defensive doctrine he had ever learned was useless against enemies who preferred to kill non-combatants rather than engage military targets. "All ships maintain defensive screens around evacuation transports," he ordered. "Accept whatever casualties necessary to protect civilian vessels." That was when the CSV Retribution arrived. Hythlok's sensors detected the human ship 3 seconds before it opened fire, and what happened next defied every principle of civilized warfare he had ever studied. Instead of hailing the Scoran forces or attempting to establish communication, the human ship simply began killing them. The first Scoran vessel died when a gravimetric compression round created a localized gravitational anomaly that collapsed its hull into a sphere roughly the size of a basketball. The second died when quantum disruption torpedoes destabilized the molecular bonds holding its armor together, causing the ship to simply disintegrate into component atoms. The remaining Scoran vessels turned to engage this new threat, and Captain Webb showed them why humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of war. "Tactical pattern Delta 7, Webb ordered. "Maximum aggression. No survivors." The Retribution moved through the Scoran formation like a predator among prey, its weapons, systems operating with mechanical precision. Gravimetric rounds crushed ships into impossibly dense spheres. Quantum torpedoes dissolved armor like acid. Antimatter missiles created brief stars that consumed everything within a 10-kilometer radius. But the most terrifying aspect of the human attack wasn't the weapons, it was the methodology. The Retribution didn't fight like the Alliance ships, using defensive formations and suppression fields. It fought like humanity had always fought, to kill enemies as quickly and efficiently as possible. "Human vessel, this is Alliance Captain Hythlok," came the transmission from the Alliance flagship. "We appreciate your assistance, but your weapon systems appear to be set for lethal force. Alliance protocols are suspended," Webb replied curtly. "This is a combat zone, not a peacekeeping operation." Hythlok watched in fascination and horror as the human ship eliminated the remaining Scoran vessels in less than 14 minutes. The efficiency was remarkable. The casual brutality was disturbing. "Human Captain," Hythlok transmitted as the last Scoran ship exploded into expanding plasma. "Your assistance was effective. However, Alliance doctrine requires that we attempt to capture enemy personnel for interrogation and possible rehabilitation." Webb's Response was delivered in a tone that made Hythlock's crystalline structure resonate with unease. Captain Hythlock, the Skorans came here to kill civilians for entertainment. They forfeited any right to consideration the moment they opened fire on evacuation transports. But surely some accommodation could have been made. No accommodation, Webb interrupted. No mercy, no second chances. When humans go to war, we fight to win. The exchange was recorded and transmitted to Alliance Fleet Command, where it was analyzed by xenobiologists, military strategists, and political scientists who struggled to understand the implications of what they had witnessed. Humans didn't just fight differently than other species. They thought about warfare in fundamentally alien ways. Where Alliance forces saw enemies to be contained or redirected, humans saw problems to be solved permanently. Word of the Kepler engagement spread through Alliance communication networks within hours. But the real revelation came when human fleet deployments began appearing throughout Skoran-threatened space. Admiral Rebecca Cross commanded the human task force assigned to the Vega sector, where Skoran forces had been conducting what they called efficiency competitions. Contests to see which Skoran captain could eliminate the most Alliance personnel in the shortest time. Cross studied the tactical reports from her flagship, the CSV Indomitable, and felt the cold fury that had sustained human warriors throughout history. The Skorans had turned warfare into a game, treating the deaths of billions of sentient beings as entertainment. Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Commander Lisa Park. Skoran fleet composition consists of 47 vessels arranged in 7 hunting packs. They're moving through Alliance space in a pattern designed to maximize civilian casualties rather than territorial control. Cross nodded grimly. The Skorans weren't trying to conquer Alliance territory. They were conducting what amounted to a massive hunting expedition. The distinction was important because it meant traditional defensive strategies were useless. Fleet composition? Cross asked. 41 human warships across all classes. Additionally, Alliance Command has attached 16 of their vessels to our task force as support units. Cross activated the fleet communication system and addressed the combined human Alliance force under her command. All ships, this is Admiral Cross. We are about to engage enemies who have chosen to treat warfare as entertainment. They hunt civilians for sport and compete among themselves for kill scores. This ends now. She paused, letting her words sink. In among crews that represented 2 completely different philosophies of warfare, Alliance vessels will provide humanitarian support and evacuation assistance. Human vessels will eliminate the threat. No quarter will be given. No prisoners will be taken. The Skoran Empire has declared war on civilization itself, and we will respond accordingly. The battle for the Vega sector began 6 hours later, when Skoran hunters encountered Cross's fleet near a civilian space station housing over 2 million refugees. The Skorans had been planning to destroy the station as part of their competition, but they found something they hadn't expected: enemies who fought back. Human tactics confused the Skorans initially. Instead of forming defensive screens around civilian targets, human ships spread out in aggressive formations designed to bring maximum firepower to bear on enemy vessels. Instead of trying to disable or capture Skoran ships, humans simply destroyed them as quickly as possible. The first Skoran hunting pack died within minutes of contact. Gravimetric weapons crushed their ships like insects. Quantum torpedoes dissolved their armor. Anti-matter missiles created brief suns that consumed everything nearby. But the most disturbing aspect of human warfare, from the Skoran perspective, was the complete absence of sporting behavior. Humans didn't fight for glory or entertainment. They fought to eliminate threats. They showed no interest in fair combat or honorable victory. They simply killed enemies with industrial efficiency. Human Admiral, transmitted Skoran Fleet Commander Vexthar from his flagship. Your tactics lack artistic merit. Where is the challenge in simply destroying opponents without allowing them opportunity for retaliation? Cross's response was delivered in a tone that carried the weight of human history. Commander Vexthar, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed warfare was a game. For humans, war is a job, and we're very good at our jobs. What followed was the systematic, Destruction of Scoran forces throughout the Vega sector. Human ships hunted in coordinated groups, using sensor networks that tracked every Scoran vessel simultaneously. When they found enemy forces, they eliminated them completely before moving on to the next target. The Scorans quickly discovered that their competition-based approach to warfare was useless against enemies who treated killing as a professional responsibility rather than entertainment. Human crews worked with the mechanical precision of factory workers, processing targets. With efficient brutality, "They don't fight," transmitted one Scoran captain before his ship was destroyed by quantum torpedoes. "They simply execute." Admiral Cross monitored the tactical displays from her command center, watching red enemy contacts disappear one by one as her fleet systematically cleared Scoran forces from Alliance space. The operation was proceeding exactly according to plan. "Admiral," reported Commander Park, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Scoran vessels. They're requesting safe conduct to neutral territory." Cross considered the request for exactly 3 seconds. "Negative, they came here to hunt civilians for sport. They don't get to surrender when they realize they're outmatched." "Ma'am, Alliance protocols suggest—" "Alliance protocols are suspended," Cross said firmly. "This is human space now, and human rules apply. The Scorans wanted to play war games. With civilian lives, now they get to experience real war." The battle for Vega sector concluded with the complete elimination of Scoran forces in the area. No enemy ships escaped. No prisoners were taken. The threat was simply removed, like a surgeon excising a tumor. Alliance observers struggled to process what they had witnessed. Human warfare wasn't just more effective than Alliance methods. It was fundamentally different in every possible way. Where Alliance forces fought to contain and redirect threats, humans fought to eliminate them entirely. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered," reported Alliance Captain Hithlock in his after-action summary. "They fight like they've been preparing for war with the universe itself." News of human military effectiveness spread through Alliance space faster than official reports could be filed. Civilian populations in threatened systems began requesting human protection specifically, while Alliance military commanders struggled to adapt their thinking to accommodate allies who considered total warfare a professional skill. But the real shock came when intelligence reports revealed the true scope of human military preparation. Earth's fleet hadn't been hastily assembled in response to the Scoran threat. It had been building for decades, waiting for exactly this kind of situation. "They've been ready for us," High Protector Mel Anor reported to the Alliance Council in an emergency session. "Not just ready for the Scorans or any specific threat, ready for any threat that might emerge from galactic space. They've been preparing for hostile contact since before they developed faster-than-light travel." The implications of that revelation settled over the Council like a cold fog. Humanity hadn't stumbled into effective warfare through desperation or accident. They had been systematically preparing to fight enemies they had never met using principles that most peaceful species found incomprehensible. "The question," Mel Anor continued, "is what we do with allies who are more effective at warfare than we are comfortable with." Before anyone could answer, priority alerts began flashing across the Council Chamber's displays. Long-range sensors had detected massive Scoran fleet movements in the galactic core, not retreating, but concentrating for what appeared to be a final, overwhelming assault on Alliance territory. The Scorans had apparently decided that humanity represented an unacceptable challenge to their entertainment-based approach to warfare. They were gathering their full military might for a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Admiral Cross received the intelligence update while her fleet was resupplying at a civilian station in the Vega sector. The report confirmed what human strategic planners had been expecting. The Scorans were escalating rather than retreating. "Ma'am," reported Commander Park, "Alliance Command is requesting immediate conference with human fleet commanders. They want to coordinate defensive strategies for the incoming Scoran offensive." Cross smiled grimly as she studied the tactical projections. "Tell Alliance Command that defensive strategies won't be necessary. We're not going to wait for the Scorans to attack." "Ma'am?" "Commander, send a message to Earth Command. Request immediate deployment of the full battle fleet. We're going to end this war before it gets any worse." Park stared at her admiral with something approaching awe. "Ma'am, are you suggesting we take the offensive against the entire Scoran Empire?" Cross's smile was the kind that had preceded every major human military victory throughout history. "Commander, I'm suggesting we show the galaxy what humans really do to enemies who threaten innocent people. We're going to demonstrate why Earth's protection comes with a lifetime guarantee." The largest fleet in human history assembled at the edge of Scoran space. Over 300 warships representing every advance in military technology that Earth had developed since first looking at the stars. Admiral Rebecca Cross stood on the bridge of the CSV Indomitable, watching deployment patterns that had been planned by strategists who understood that this battle would determine humanity's place in galactic civilization. "Fleet status report," Cross requested as the final ships moved into formation. "All vessels report ready for combat operations," replied Commander Lisa Park. "Total complement: 312 human warships, 47 Alliance support vessels, and surprisingly, 17 independent ships from species that aren't officially part of either alliance." Cross raised an eyebrow at that last detail. Independent ships? Species that have been watching the conflict develop. Word of human military effectiveness has spread beyond alliance space. Some civilizations are apparently interested in seeing how this plays out. The Admiral nodded grimly. Humanity's first major interstellar war was being watched by dozens of species across the galaxy. The outcome would establish precedents that might endure for centuries. Intelligence update on Scoran. Deployments. Park activated the tactical display showing the core systems of the Scoran Empire. Long-range sensors confirm massive fleet concentrations across 7 star systems. Preliminary estimates suggest they've assembled over 2,000 ships for what they're calling the final hunt. Cross studied the enemy positions with professional interest. The Scorans had apparently decided to stake everything on one massive confrontation, gathering their scattered forces into overwhelming concentrations designed to crush any opposition through sheer numbers. It was exactly the kind of tactical thinking that had gotten them into trouble with humans in the first place. "They still don't understand," Cross murmured. "They think this is about winning battles." "Ma'am, Commander, the Scorans are still treating this like a competition. They want to prove they can defeat us in glorious combat. What they don't realize is that humans don't fight battles. We fight wars, and we fight to win them permanently." Cross activated the fleet communication system and addressed the combined force under her. "Command." The transmission reached not only human and Alliance vessels, but the independent observers who had come to witness what might be the most important military engagement in galactic history. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross. In approximately 6 hours we will engage the full military might of the Scoran Empire. They have chosen to concentrate their forces in an attempt to overwhelm us through numerical superiority. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of human military doctrine." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "The Scorans believe they are fighting for entertainment and glory. They are wrong. We are not here to provide them with amusement. We are here to eliminate a threat to galactic civilization. When this operation concludes, the Scoran Empire will no longer exist as a military force. Not defeated, not contained, not redirected, eliminated." Cross looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing the same cold determination she felt reflected in their faces. Human vessels will implement Protocol Omega across all target systems simultaneously. Alliance vessels will provide search and rescue for any survivors. Independent observers are advised to maintain safe distances and document what they witness for their respective governments. The transmission ended, leaving the combined fleet in relative silence as crews made final preparations for what many understood might be the most decisive battle in galactic history. High Protector Mel Honor monitored the human preparations from her flagship, struggling to process the implications of what she was witnessing. Alliance xenobiologists had spent weeks trying to understand human military psychology, but they kept reaching conclusions that challenged everything Alliance civilization believed about the nature of warfare. "They really intend to destroy the entire Scoran Empire," observed Dr. Kethmore, the Alliance's leading expert on aggressive species behavior. Not occupy their territory or force political changes, literally eliminate their ability to threaten anyone ever again. Melaner nodded grimly. Human strategic thinking appears to be based on the principle of permanent solution rather than temporary resolution. When they identify a threat, they remove it completely. But the implications, I know. Melanor watched human warships maneuvering with the precision of a mechanical process. If humans can eliminate the Skorran Empire in a single operation, what does that say about every other military force in the galaxy? The question hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither wanted to consider fully. Meanwhile, in the Skorran core systems, Fleet Commander Vexithar reviewed his own tactical preparations with growing excitement. The humans had proven themselves worthy opponents, but they were still vastly outnumbered. The final hunt would be the greatest challenge Skorran warriors had ever faced. Status of all hunting fleets? Vexithar asked his tactical coordinator. 2,047 vessels across 7 systems, all armed and ready for glorious combat, came the enthusiastic reply. The humans cannot possibly match our numbers, regardless of their technological advantages. Vexithar's mandibles clicked with anticipation. And our scoring system? Fully operational. Each captain will be credited for verified kills based on ship classification and crew complement. The victor of the final hunt will be remembered for all time. The Skorran commander studied the tactical displays showing his fleet dispositions with satisfaction. The humans had been efficient in their previous encounters, but efficiency meant nothing against overwhelming numerical superiority. Today would prove that Skorran martial spirit could overcome any technological advantage. Begin the approach, Vexithar ordered. Let the final hunt commence. What happened next redefined galactic understanding of warfare on a fundamental level. The human fleet didn't advance system by system, engaging Skorran forces in conventional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they implemented what their tactical manuals called simultaneous strategic elimination, a coordinated strike designed to destroy enemy capabilities across multiple star systems at exactly the same moment. Admiral Cross watched the EI countdown timer reach 0 and spoke 2 words that ended the Skorran Empire. Execute Omega. Across 7 star systems, human weapons that had never been used in actual combat demonstrated why Earth's military planners had spent decades preparing for this moment. Gravimetric compression bombs created artificial black holes that consumed entire enemy fleets. Quantum disruption devices destabilized the physical laws holding matter together across volumes of space larger than most planets. But the most devastating weapons were the ones that attacked the very concept of Skorran civilization. Memetic warfare systems broadcast information patterns designed to disrupt Skorran neural functions. Biological agents specifically tailored to Skorran physiology rendered their life support systems useless. Cultural viruses introduced through captured communication networks undermined their social structures at the most basic level. Time to completion? Cross asked as she monitored the systematic destruction of an empire. 17 minutes for primary target elimination, Park reported. An additional 6 hours for complete infrastructure sterilization. Cross nodded, watching tactical displays that showed red enemy contacts disappearing faster than her computers could update their positions. The Skorran Empire's 2,000 ships were being eliminated at a rate that suggested humanity had been deliberately restraining itself during previous engagements. Any survivors requesting surrender? Negative, ma'am. Protocol Omega doesn't provide for surrender options. Cross felt no satisfaction in the destruction she was orchestrating. This wasn't a victory to be celebrated. It was a problem being solved with industrial efficiency. High Protector Mel Honor watched the elimination of the Skorran Empire from her position in the outer system, her crystalline features reflecting disbelief at the scale and speed of human military operations. Is this really happening? Asked Dr. Kethmore, as they observed entire star systems being systematically cleared of Skorran presence. It appears that humans have been preparing for total warfare scenarios that most species never consider. Melanor replied quietly. They didn't just develop weapons to fight enemies. They developed methods to eliminate the concept of those enemies entirely. The destruction was so complete and so rapid that Alliance monitoring systems struggled to keep track of what was happening. Scoran fleets that had existed moments before simply stopped existing. Not destroyed in conventional terms, but removed from reality through weapons that operated on principles most species had never imagined. How is this level of destruction even possible? Kethmore asked. Because humans approach warfare as an engineering problem rather than a social interaction, Mel Anner realized. They don't fight to defeat enemies. They fight to eliminate categories of threats. When the 17 minutes had elapsed, Admiral Cross received confirmation that primary objectives had been achieved. The Scaran Empire's military capability had been reduced to zero. Their infrastructure had been eliminated. Their ability to threaten any other species had been permanently removed. Fleet status? Cross requested. Formal complaint. The implications were staggering. Any word from the Alliance Council? High Protector Mel Anor is requesting immediate conference. Priority Alpha classification. Cross activated the communication system and found herself looking at the alien leader who had originally offered Earth protection from galactic threats. The irony was not lost on either of them. Admiral Cross, Mel Anner said carefully, the Alliance Council would like to discuss formal arrangements for ongoing galactic security. What kind of arrangements? We would like to request that Earth assume primary responsibility for military threats to Alliance territory. In exchange, the Alliance would provide technological and humanitarian support for developing civilizations. Cross considered the proposal. It was essentially an admission that the Alliance had been doing things backwards for 2,000 years, trying to provide protection they weren't equipped to deliver while neglecting the areas where they actually excelled. What about oversight? Command authority? Rules of engagement? Mel Anner's expression suggested she had already considered these questions extensively. Admiral, after witnessing today's operation, the Alliance Council believes that human military judgment is superior to our own. We would prefer to provide support services while leaving tactical decisions to Earth Command. You're offering us a blank check to police the galaxy? We're acknowledging that humans are better equipped for that responsibility than we are, Mel Anor corrected. The Alliance has spent 2 millennia trying to protect civilizations from threats we didn't fully understand. You eliminated one of the greatest threats in galactic history in 17 minutes. Cross looked around her bridge at crew members who had just participated in the most decisive military victory in human history. They had proven that Earth could defend not just itself, but galactic civilization as a whole. High Protector, Cross said finally, Earth accepts responsibility for galactic security, but we do things our way. What does that mean? Cross's smile was the same one humans had worn since their ancestors first picked up sharp sticks to defend their tribes. It means that when we're protecting something, we don't do it halfway. Any species or organization that threatens innocent civilians will be eliminated quickly, efficiently, and permanently. And peaceful species will be free to pursue whatever goals they choose, knowing that someone is watching to make sure the universe's predators don't interfere. The formal agreement was negotiated over the following weeks, establishing what historians would later call the Terran Protection Compact. Earth assumed military responsibility for galactic security, while the Alliance continued providing technological and humanitarian assistance to developing civilizations. The arrangement worked perfectly for everyone involved. Alliance species could continue their peaceful pursuits without worrying about external threats. Developing civilizations received protection from enemies that could be eliminated rather than merely contained. And humanity finally had a purpose that matched their particular talents. Admiral Cross stood on the observation deck of the CSV Indomitable 6 months later, watching human patrol fleets deploy to the galaxy's outer regions, where long-range sensors had detected signs of new potential threats. Earth's protection came with a lifetime guarantee, and there was always work to be done. Admiral, reported Commander Park, we're receiving a priority transmission from deep space monitoring stations. Something is approaching from intergalactic space. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Cross smiled as she studied the preliminary data. Whatever was coming would find that the galaxy was under new management. management that didn't believe in containment or deterrence when innocent lives were at stake. Alert all patrol fleets, Cross ordered. Unknown contact approaching galactic perimeter. Assess threat level and respond accordingly. The message that went out on all frequencies throughout the galaxy was simple and direct. This territory is under Terran protection. State your intentions or withdraw immediately. Most species chose to state their intentions. Those that didn't provided valuable training opportunities for Earth's newest generation of military personnel, who learned that the universe was full of problems waiting to be solved. And humans, as always, were very good at solving problems. The end of the world began on a Tuesday, not with a bang or a whimper, but with thousands of dark shapes blocking out the sun. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of the North American Defense Command, binoculars pressed against his eyes. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the railing. The ships hung in the sky like massive black stones. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They simply existed where they should not exist. "How many?" asked General Walker, his voice unusually quiet. "Too many to count, sir," replied Stone, lowering the binoculars. At 42, Stone had seen his share of combat and crises, but nothing like this. His weather-beaten face showed the first signs of real fear his colleagues had ever seen. The radio on the general's belt crackled to life. "Sir, we're getting the same reports from all over the world. London, Beijing, Moscow, Johannesburg, Sydney, they're everywhere." Stone watched as a smaller craft detached from one of the massive ships. It descended toward the United Nations building in New York. The world held its breath. Dr. Emma Reed pushed through the crowd of scientists gathered around the monitors. As the head of the Defense Department's Xenobiology Division, she should have been prepared for this day. They had trained for it, planned for it. But deep down, most believed first contact would never happen in their lifetime. "It's broadcasting something," said her assistant Tom Miller, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Tom was young, barely 30, but was the best tech specialist the military had. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he worked to decode the signal. "Can you translate it?" Emma asked, brushing a strand of graying hair from her face. "I don't need to," Tom replied, looking up with wide eyes. "It's in English." The message played across every screen, every radio, every phone on Earth at exactly the same time. "People of Earth, we are the Vex. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance will be met with correction. Acceptance will be rewarded with life. You have one Earth Day to present your leaders for processing." The message repeated 3 times before silence fell again. "Processing," Emma whispered. The word sent chills down her spine. The world's governments debated for exactly 20 hours before reaching a decision. Stone sat in the back of the emergency session, watching as leaders from every nation argued, threatened, and finally reached the only possible conclusion. "We fight," said the American president, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "Humanity does not surrender." Stone nodded. In grim satisfaction, he had never voted for her, but in this moment he felt a swell of pride. The response was sent exactly 3 hours before the Vex deadline. It was simple. "Earth belongs to humanity. We choose freedom." The Vex replied with fire. The first attacks targeted military installations. Stone watched from the underground bunker as live feeds showed bases around the world going dark. There was no explosion, no dramatic battle. The Vex ships simply passed overhead, and everything electronic died. Then came the ground forces. They weren't what anyone expected. Not the lizard-like creatures of science fiction, or the gray humanoids of conspiracy theories. The Vex foot soldiers were mechanical, but moved like living things. 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and smooth, featureless faces that somehow still managed to look cruel. "They're not robots," Emma insisted, studying the footage. "There's something organic inside them, some kind of pilot or essence." But there was no time to study them. Within hours, the Vex had taken control of every major city on Earth. Millions died in the first day alone. 2 weeks after the invasion, Stone led what remained of his unit through the ruins of Chicago. The once mighty city was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed afraid to blow. "Movement ahead," whispered Anna Frost, the former diplomat who had become one of Stone's most trusted soldiers. Her blonde hair was now cut, short and dirty, her once manicured hands wrapped around a rifle. Stone raised his fist, signaling the team to stop. Through his scope, he saw a Vex patrol marching 3 humans toward a large structure that had been built in the center of what was once Grant Park. The building pulsed with an eerie blue light. "Processing center," Tom murmured. They had seen them before, these strange structures that appeared in every captured city. Humans went in. Nothing came out. "We need to know what's happening in there," Stone decided. "Doctor?" Emma nodded grimly. She had been arguing for this mission for days. "If we're going to fight them, we need to understand them." The inside of the processing center was worse than any of them had imagined. Humans were lined up in rows, connected to machines that glowed with the same blue light as the building. But it wasn't the machines that made Stone's blood run cold. It was the expressions on the people's faces. Pure terror, frozen in place as something was slowly drained from them. "They're harvesting something," Emma whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her horror. She pulled out a small device of her own design and began taking readings. "We need to help them," Anna said, raising her weapon. Stone put a hand on her arm. "There are hundreds. We'd never make it. We need to understand first, then come back with a plan." A scream cut through the air as a new batch of prisoners was brought in. Among them was a child, no more than 10 years old. Something in Stone snapped. "New plan," he growled. "We take as many as we can. Now." The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire, screams, the strange high-pitched whine of Vex weapons. Stone's team managed to free 23 people before they had to retreat. As they ran through the underground tunnels that had become humanity's new roads, Emma couldn't stop staring at her readings. "What is it?" Stone asked once they were safe in their hidden base, an old subway station 40 feet below the city. "I don't know how to explain this," Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. "But according to these readings, they're not just killing people. They're extracting something that my instruments can only register as neural energy." "They're taking their souls?" Anna asked, her face pale. "I don't believe in souls," Emma replied, "but something about human brainwave patterns is valuable to them, and there's something else." She pulled up another reading on her device. "When the Vex tech interfaces with human neural patterns, there's a strange feedback loop that doesn't seem to happen with their other conquered species." "How do you know about other species?" Tom asked. Emma pointed to markings on the wall of the processing center, visible in the photos she'd taken. "This isn't their first rodeo. These are tallies. Dozens of worlds, dozens of species." "So what makes us different?" Stone asked, cleaning blood from a cut on his arm. "I don't know yet," Emma admitted. "But I think it might be our only advantage." As the small group of survivors tended to their wounds and the rescued prisoners, none of them noticed that one of Emma's devices was still active, its readings growing stronger by the minute. None of them realized that whatever made humans unique, whatever created that strange feedback loop, was growing stronger in response to the Vex presence. Something was waking up inside humanity, something the Vex, with all their terrible power, would learn to fear. 3 months passed since the day the sky turned black with Vex ships. 3 months of hiding, fighting, and dying. But also 3 months of learning. Dr. Emma Reed hadn't slept properly in weeks. Her makeshift lab in the abandoned subway station was lit by a mix of salvaged LED lights and old emergency lamps that cast long shadows across the walls. Papers covered in complex diagrams and hastily scrawled notes were taped everywhere. In the center of it all sat a piece of Vex technology, a ASI neural interface device they had managed to steal during their third raid on a processing center. "You need to rest," said Tom Miller, placing a cup of something that vaguely resembled coffee next to her. Emma didn't look up from her microscope. "Can't. I'm close to something. I can feel it." Tom sighed and leaned against the table. "Close. To what exactly?" We've been studying this thing for weeks and all we've learned is that it gives people headaches and nosebleeds. That's not all, Emma muttered. She finally looked up, her eyes bloodshot, but bright with excitement. The headaches are happening because the device is trying to connect with our brains, but there's a mismatch. Like trying to plug something into the wrong socket. And that's good news? Tom raised an eyebrow. It means they didn't design their tech to work with humans, which means they didn't expect whatever it is about our brains that makes us different. Emma stood up suddenly, wincing as her stiff muscles protested. Get Stone and Anna. They need to see this. Captain Stone arrived 20 minutes later with Anna Frost. Both were covered in dirt and looked exhausted. They had been scouting a new Vex outpost to the north. This better be good, Doc, Stone said, his voice rough from breathing in too much dust and smoke. We've got movement topside. More of those harvester units moving into the suburbs. Emma nodded and led them to a small side room where a volunteer from their group, a former electrician named Paul, was sitting with electrodes attached to his temples. Meet our first successful interface, Emma said proudly. Paul gave a weak smile and raised his hand in greeting. The movement caused a small device on the table next to him to light up and hover a few inches off the surface. Stone's eyes widened. Is he controlling that? Yes and no, Emma explained. The Vex tech doesn't work like our technology. It doesn't respond to direct commands. It's more intuitive. Paul here is thinking about how it would feel if the device moved and the device responds. That's impressive, Anna said cautiously. But how does this help us fight them? Emma's smile widened. Because this is just the beginning. I've managed to modify the interface to work with human neural patterns, and I've discovered something incredible. She moved to a computer screen and pulled up 2 brain scans side by side. This is a normal human brain, she said, pointing to the image on the left. And this is Paul's brain after 30 minutes connected to the modified interface. The differences were subtle, but unmistakable. Certain areas glowed brighter, new connections forming between regions that normally didn't communicate. What are we looking at? Stone asked, stepping closer. Evolution, Emma replied simply. Rapid directed evolution of neural pathways. The interface is changing him, but not in the way the Vex intended. It's like our brains are rewiring themselves to not just use their technology, but to improve upon it. Tom frowned. Wait, are you saying the Vex tech is making us smarter? Not exactly, Emma said. It's making us different, accessing parts of our brains we normally don't use. And here's the kicker. She pulled up another scan. This is what happened when we captured that Vex soldier last week, and I briefly connected it to the interface. The alien brain scan was dramatically different from a human's, but one thing was clear. There were areas of damage, like tiny electrical burns. Our patterns hurt them, Emma said quietly. Something about the way human minds work is inherently incompatible with, maybe even hostile to, their neural structure. Stone looked at Paul with new interest. Can he access their systems? Their networks? Theoretically, yes, Emma nodded, but we need more practice, more volunteers, and she hesitated. And what? Anna pressed. And we need to understand what we're actually doing, Emma admitted. Because whatever this is, it's not just technology. The Vex aren't just harvesting people for labor or resources. They're harvesting something else. 2 days later, Stone led a team into a smaller processing center on the outskirts of what used to be a quiet suburban neighborhood. With them was Paul, wearing Emma's modified interface device. 3 other volunteers, a former nurse named Lisa, a college student called Mark, and an ex-cop named David, also wore the devices. Remember, we're here for information, Stone reminded them as they approached the building. Get in, connect to their system, download whatever you can and get out. No heroics. The 4 interface users nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. Emma had warned them that prolonged connection could cause side effects, nosebleeds, migraines, possibly worse. 30 minutes max, Tom added, checking his watch. After that, I'm pulling the plug whether you're done or not. The raid started well. Stone's team had become efficient at avoiding Vex patrols, and the processing center was less heavily guarded than the larger ones in the city center. They made it to the central control node without being detected. Paul went first, pressing his palm against the smooth surface of what they had identified as an access terminal. The modified interface on his head hummed softly as it established a connection. His eyes fluttered closed, then opened again, but they were different. The pupils expanded until they were almost all black. I can see it, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Their network. It's beautiful. One by one, the other 3 volunteers connected. Their expressions changed from concentration to wonder to horror as they accessed the Vex system. They call it soulfire, Lisa said suddenly, her voice distant. The energy they harvest from sentient beings. It feeds something in the void. Gods, Mark whispered. They worship void gods, ancient entities that promise power in exchange for soulfire. Dozens of worlds, David added, his voice breaking. They've harvested dozens of worlds before ours. Stone exchanged worried glances with Anna and Tom. This was more than they had expected to learn, and none of it was good news. Ask about weaknesses, Stone urged. How do we fight them? The 4 volunteers were silent for a moment, seemingly searching through the vast network. Then simultaneously, all 4 began to bleed from their noses. Something's wrong, Tom said, moving forward to disconnect them. Their vital signs are spiking. Before he could reach them, Paul's eyes snapped fully open, now completely black. They fear us, he said, but his voice had changed, becoming deeper, almost echoing. Humans are different. Our minds don't just resist them. They can channel something else, something they've been running from for millennia. We need to go, Stone said urgently as alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Now! They disconnected the volunteers and retreated, fighting their way out through suddenly alert Vex guards. By the time they made it back to their hideout, Paul and the others were unconscious but still alive. Emma worked tirelessly to stabilize them, monitoring their brain activity with growing concern. What did they mean? Stone asked her later as they watched the 4 volunteers sleeping fitfully. About channeling something else? Emma shook her head, her expression troubled. I don't know, but their brain scans show even more changes now. It's like they opened a door to something. And whatever it is, I don't think it can be closed again. In his sleep, Paul smiled, his eyes moving rapidly behind closed lids as if seeing something wonderful and terrible. Around his bed, the lights flickered briefly, and for just a moment the air seemed to shimmer with an energy that hadn't been there before. The Vex had brought hell to Earth, but humanity, it seemed, had something worse waiting to be unleashed. The map spread across the old subway maintenance table showed the remains of what used to be Chicago. Red X marks indicated Vex strongholds. Blue circles marked resistance safe houses. Green stars represented successful strike points over the past 2 weeks. There were 12 green stars. Captain James Stone placed a 13th green star on the map and stepped back, allowing himself a small smile. The ammunition depot near the old museum is down. That makes 13 hits with 0 casualties on our side. Anna Frost nodded approvingly. The Vex are getting sloppy. They didn't expect resistance to last this long, let alone grow stronger. They didn't expect the interfaces, Tom Miller corrected, glancing toward the side chamber where 20 volunteers now trained daily with Dr. Reed's improved neural devices. What had started as 4 test subjects had grown into what Stone called their Special Weapons Division. Emma Reed entered the command room, looking tired but satisfied. Unlike the early prototype, her latest neural interfaces were smaller, more elegant, silver circlets that fit comfortably around the wearers' heads. No more nosebleeds, no more migraines. At least not for the humans. How are they doing? Stone asked. Better than expected, Emma replied. Paul can now disable a Vex security system from half a mile away. Lisa has learned to redirect their communication signals, and Mark, Mark can actually control their smaller units for short periods. The implications hung in the air. What had begun as desperate guerrilla attacks had evolved into something much more effective. The human resistance was no longer just surviving, they were starting to win. General Krath stood perfectly still as the human resistance destroyed another outpost. Through the eyes of his soldiers, he watched the small band of fighters move with surprising coordination. Some wielded conventional weapons, but others merely stood back, their eyes dark, their heads adorned with strange devices. These were the troubling ones, the ones who could reach into Vex systems with their minds, the ones who caused his soldiers to malfunction, to turn on each other, to simply shut down. This should not be possible, Krath said to the empty command chamber. His voice was like grinding metal, each word precisely formed. They are lesser beings, prey species. The holographic display showed another Vex unit falling under human control, turning its weapons on its companions. Krath felt something unfamiliar stirring within. Him, the humans would call it fear. The Vex had no word for it. Increase harvesting operations, he commanded. Double the soulfire extraction quotas. The Void Lords must be appeased if we are to receive their guidance. The chamber's automated systems acknowledged the command, but Krath detected hesitation in the machine's response. Even his own technology was being affected by these humans. And bring me one of them, he added, one with the mind device. I must understand what we face. David, the former police officer, led a small team through the underground tunnels. Their mission was simple: plant interface disruptors at key points in the Vex network. These small devices, developed by Emma and Tom, would create areas where the Vex couldn't communicate with each other, blind spots in their otherwise perfect surveillance. 2 minutes, David whispered to the 3 fighters accompanying him. The silver circlet on his head hummed softly as he extended his senses, feeling for Vex presences nearby. There's a patrol coming. 2 units, standard configuration. The team pressed themselves against the walls of the tunnel, weapons ready. David closed his eyes, focusing on the approaching Vex soldiers. With the improved interface, he could now not only detect them but also sense their intentions, their programming. Wait, he said suddenly. Something's wrong, they know. The wall beside them exploded inward. Not the 2 Vex soldiers they had sensed, but a massive harvester unit, 9 feet tall with multiple limbs ending in various tools and weapons. It moved with terrible speed, grabbing the nearest human fighter before anyone could react. Ambush, David shouted, reaching out with his mind to try to disrupt the harvester's systems. But this unit was different, shielded somehow against his mental intrusion. In seconds, 2 of the fighters were down. The third managed to fire a plasma rifle, salvaged and modified Vex technology, that tore through one of the harvester's limbs. David pulled his own weapon, but before he could use it, something struck him from behind. As consciousness faded, his last thought was to activate the interface's emergency beacon. Then darkness took him. They took David. Emma's voice was flat, controlled, but her hands shook as she showed the team the data from his interface's final transmission. And they did it deliberately. This wasn't a random patrol, it was a targeted abduction. Stone slammed his fist on the table. They're adapting to us. We need to get him back, said Lisa, her eyes now permanently darkened around the edges from prolonged interface use. They'll try to extract information. Worse, said Paul quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Of all the interface users, he had connected the deepest with the Vex systems, sometimes spending days in a trance-like state, navigating their network. They'll try to understand how we're doing what we're doing. They fear it. Fear what exactly? Anna asked the question. They'd all been wondering. What is it that we're channeling when we use these interfaces? Paul exchanged glances with Emma, who nodded slightly. It was time to tell them. We call them the Bright, Paul explained. That's the closest translation we can manage. They exist, in a dimension parallel to ours, a place of pure energy and consciousness. The Vex and their Void Lords have been at war with the Bright for millennia, and somehow humans can, what? Connect to these bright things? Stone looked skeptical. Emma took over. It's our neural structure. Humans have a unique pattern. Our brains are more chaotic than most species, more adaptable. The Vex harvest what they call soul fire from sentient beings, a kind of neural energy that feeds their void lords. But human soul fire has a different quality. It resonates with the bright. Tom let out a low whistle. So we're not just fighting aliens. We're caught in the middle of some kind of cosmic war between dimension gods. Pretty much, Emma admitted. And now they have David. David woke strapped to a table that hummed with energy. His interface had been removed, leaving him feeling strangely hollow, disconnected. His head throbbed with pain, but he forced himself to focus, to observe. The chamber around him was unlike any Vex facility he had seen before. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and in the center of the room stood General Krath himself. David recognized him from the Resistance's intelligence reports, the regional commander of Vex forces, a being of singular cruelty and efficiency. "You are awake," Krath observed. His voice sounded like metal grinding on stone. "Good. Unconscious. Subjects provide inadequate data." David said nothing, conserving his strength, assessing his situation. "Your kind has caused difficulties," Krath continued, moving closer. "This is unexpected, unprecedented. You should have been harvested. By now your world stripped of all useful resources, your soul fire feeding the glory of the Void Lords." "Sorry to disappoint," David managed to say, his voice hoarse. Krath made a sound that might have been laughter. "You misunderstand. This is not disappointment. This is opportunity. Your species has demonstrated qualities that may be of interest to my masters." A smaller Vex entered the chamber, carrying a device that looked disturbingly similar to Emma's interfaces, but corrupted somehow, twisted with additions that made David's skin crawl. "We have studied your technology," Krath said. "Primitive, but effective. Now we will study you." The smaller Vex approached, the dark interface in its hands. David struggled against his restraints, but they held firm. As the device was placed, on his head he closed his eyes and focused on one thing, the training Paul had given all interface users for worst-case scenarios. "If you're ever captured," Paul had told them, "and they try to connect you to their tech, don't fight it. Instead, become a door. Open yourself completely." The dark interface activated, and David screamed. But not from pain. From the rush of power as he threw his mind wide open, becoming not a prisoner but a gateway. Through him, for just a moment, the Bright looked directly at General Krath, and for the first time in his long existence, the Vex commander knew true fear. Alarms blared throughout the facility as systems overloaded, as reality itself seemed to warp around the interrogation chamber, and in the heart of the Vex stronghold something began to wake up. The counterstrike had begun, but not in the way the Resistance had planned. This was something else. Something worse than anything the Vex had brought to Earth. This was humanity's true power unleashed. The rescue team moved through the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, their faces grim with determination. Captain Stone led the way, with Anna and Tom flanking him. Behind them came Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the three strongest interface users. All of them wore the silver circlets that connected them to both Vex technology and something else, something from beyond. "The signal's getting stronger," Lisa whispered, her eyes partly closed as she focused on the faint beacon from David's interface. "He's still alive, but there's something else, something big happening around him." The sky above them had taken on a strange quality, not quite the natural blue of Earth's atmosphere, nor the dark pollution of Vex occupation. It shimmered with occasional flashes of light, like heat lightning in impossible colors. "That's new," Anna remarked, looking up with concern. "What are they doing up there?" Paul's expression was distant, his mind partly connected to the Vex network. "It's not them. It's us. It's what David did." Stone stopped and turned to face the interface users. "Explain now." Paul took a deep breath. "When the Vex connected David to their systems, he followed the emergency protocol. He opened himself completely, became a gateway." "A gateway to what?" Tom asked. though his face suggested he already feared the answer. To the Bright, Paul replied. Simply. David opened a direct connection, bigger than anything we've managed before, and now the Bright are coming through. As if in response to his words, the ground trembled beneath their feet. In the distance, toward the center of the city, where the largest Vex processing center stood, a column of light shot upward into the strange sky. We need to move, Stone ordered. Now. General Krath had abandoned the interrogation chamber, but it was too late. The human subject, David, still lay strapped to the table, the modified interface on his head now glowing, with a light that should not exist in the physical world. Around him, reality itself seemed to be thinning. Containment protocols have failed, reported a lesser Vex commander. The breach is expanding. Krath moved through the corridors of his command center, his mechanical body operating at peak efficiency, despite the chaos around him. Vex soldiers scrambled to defensive positions as systems failed all around them. For the first time in the invasion, they were not the predators. They were prey. The Void Lords must be informed, Krath decided. This development exceeds standard operational parameters. He reached the central chamber of the processing center, where the harvested soulfire was collected and channeled. The massive container glowed with blue-black energy, the accumulated neural patterns of thousands of human victims. Krath connected directly to the container, preparing to send an emergency transmission to his masters in the void. But as his consciousness touched the harvested energy, he recoiled in shock. The human soulfire had changed. It was no longer the docile energy source they had been collecting. It had become active, aware, and it reached back toward him with terrible purpose. For the first time, Krath knew what the humans called fear. The rescue team fought their way through increasingly disorganized Vex patrols. Something was wrong with the alien soldiers. They moved erratically, sometimes attacking each other, sometimes simply shutting down mid-stride. Their network is collapsing, Mark explained as they ran. Whatever David did, it's spreading through their entire system. They reached the outer perimeter of the main processing center. The massive structure now pulsed with competing energies, the familiar blue-black of Vex technology and a new white-gold radiance that seemed to be eating away at the building from within. There, Lisa pointed. 10th floor. That's where David. Stone assessed the situation. The main entrance was heavily guarded despite the chaos. We need a distraction. We can do better than that, Paul said quietly. The three interface users looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. We can open more doors. Before Stone could ask what he meant, the three of them sat down in a small circle, their interfaces humming as they joined. Hands. Their eyes closed, then opened again, now glowing with the same white-gold light that emanated from parts of the building. What are you doing? Anna asked, her voice tight with concern. What we were meant to do, Lisa answered, her voice overlaid with something else, something older and vaster than human speech. What humans have always been able to do. Open doors. The air around them began to shimmer, reality bending slightly as if seen through heat waves. Then the world tore. There was no other word for it. A vertical split appeared in the empty space before them, revealing not the expected darkness, but a realm of pure, radiant energy. Through the tier stepped a figure. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of light, white at its core, gold at its edges, constantly shifting and reforming. More tiers appeared around the building, more light beings stepping through. What are they? Stone whispered, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. The Bright, Mark replied, his voice also changed, resonating with power. The enemies of the Void Lords, the balance to the darkness the Vex serve, and now, our allies. The light beings moved toward the Vex guards, who fired their weapons in desperation. The energy blasts passed harmlessly through the luminous forms. When the Bright reached the Vex, they simply merged with them. The alien soldiers convulsed, light pouring from every joint in their mechanical bodies before collapsing. Now we can get to David, Paul said, standing up shakily. The three interface users looked drained but determined. The path is clear. David was no longer fully human when they found him. The modified Vex interface had partially merged with his head, tendrils of alien technology extending into his skull. But his eyes, when they opened, were clear and aware. "You came," he said simply as Stone cut through his restraints. "Of course we did," Stone replied. "Can you walk?" David sat up slowly. "I don't know if walking matters anymore. Things have changed. I've changed." Around them, the building shuddered as battles raged throughout its structure. The Bright moved through walls as if they weren't there, hunting down Vex soldiers and commanders. The processing chambers were being systematically destroyed, the harvested soulfire released back into the atmosphere. "We need to find Krath," David said suddenly. "He's trying to contact the Void Lords. If he succeeds, they'll come through. And that would be bad." Tom helped David to his feet. "Worse than what's happening now?" David's modified interface pulsed with light. "Much worse. The Bright are powerful, but they're just advanced scouts. The Void Lords are gods. Ancient, hungry gods." Stone nodded, grimly. "Then we stop him. Where?" David closed his eyes for a moment, connecting to what remained of the Vex network. "Central chamber. Top floor. But we need to hurry. He's already started the summoning." They found Krath in a massive circular room dominated by a swirling portal of darkness. Unlike the clean tears through which the Bright had entered, this was a jagged wound in reality, leaking shadows that seemed to consume the light around them. The Vex general stood before it, his mechanical body transformed. Parts of him glowed with the same light as the Bright, while others had become even darker, absorbing all illumination. He was caught between two forces being torn apart by their conflict. "You are too late," Krath said as they entered, his voice now a discordant mixture of tones. "The void beckons, my masters come." Through the dark portal, something massive began to take shape, a being of such profound wrongness that looking at it caused physical pain. "We can't fight that," Anna whispered, raising her weapon anyway. "We don't have to fight it," David said, stepping forward. The modified interface on his head now glowed brightly enough to illuminate the entire chamber. "We just need to close the door." He looked back at his friends, a sad smile on his face. "And sometimes, to close a door, you have to sacrifice the key." Before anyone could stop him, David ran toward the portal. Krath moved to intercept him, but Paul, Lisa, and Mark raised their hands in unison, their interfaces flaring. The Vex general froze in place, caught in their combined mental grip. "David, no," Stone shouted, but it was too late. David leaped into the portal, directly at the forming shape of the Void Lord. As he made contact, the modified interface on his head exploded with light. The darkness recoiled, the portal beginning to collapse in on itself. "Channel the Bright." David's voice echoed from within the shrinking darkness. "All of you, now." The three interface users joined hands again, their minds reaching out not just to each other, but to all the light beings that had entered the world. Throughout the building, throughout the city, the Bright turned their attention to the portal. Light met darkness in a collision that shouldn't have been possible in the physical world. The portal shrunk further, the massive shape within it retreating, pulled back by David's sacrifice. With a final flash that temporarily blinded everyone in the room, the portal closed. Where it had been, a small pulsing spot of perfect balance remained, neither light nor dark, but something in between. As vision returned, Stone saw Krath lying on the floor, his mechanical body now inert. The general had not survived being the battlefield between such cosmic forces. "David?" Anna called, looking around desperately. "Where's David?" Paul shook his head, tears in his glowing eyes. "He's gone. But not dead. Not exactly." He pointed to the pulsing spot where the portal had been. "He's there, holding the door closed for now." "For now?" Stone asked. "This isn't over," Lisa said quietly. "The Void Lords know about us now. They'll try again, and the Bright won't leave either. Earth has become something new, a battleground between ancient powers, Mark nodded solemnly. And humans are the keys to both realms, the bridges between dimensions. The Vex didn't understand what they were waking when they came here. Stone looked at the spot where his friend had sacrificed himself, then at the interface users whose humanity was becoming less certain with each passing hour. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Paul replied, his voice echoing with the voices of the Bright. Everything changes. 1 month after the battle at the Chicago Processing Center, the world was unrecognizable, not just from the destruction the Vex had brought, but from what had followed. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of what had once been the North American Defense Command, the same spot where he had first seen the Vex ships darkening the sky. Now he watched a different sky, one where reality itself seemed thinner, where colors that had no names occasionally rippled across the blue expanse. "It's beautiful, in a way," said Anna Frost, joining him at the railing. Her blonde hair had grown out slightly, now streaked with premature gray from the stress of recent months. "Beautiful and terrifying," Stone replied, "just like everything else these days." Below them, the former military base had been transformed into something new, a combination of command center, research facility, and embassy. Humans worked alongside, beings of pure light, the Bright who had chosen to remain in the physical world after the Vex retreat. 3 weeks ago, the alien invaders had suddenly abandoned Earth. Their ships had lifted off without warning, leaving behind their structures and some of their technology. No one was naive enough to believe they had given up. This was merely a strategic withdrawal. "Dr. Reed wants to see you," Anna said after a moment of silence. "She says they've made a breakthrough with the portal." Stone nodded and followed her, back inside. The corridors were busy with activity as humans and Bright moved with purpose. Some of the humans wore the silver interfaces, their eyes glowing slightly with inner light. These were the bridges, as they now called themselves. Humans, who could channel the Bright and serve as conduits between dimensions. Emma Reed's laboratory had expanded to take up an entire wing of the building. When Stone entered, he found her standing before a familiar pulsing spot of balanced energy. A perfect replica of the one in Chicago where David had sacrificed himself. "You've recreated it," Stone observed. Emma turned to him, her face lighting up with excitement. She looked younger somehow, energized by the incredible discoveries of recent weeks. "Better than that, we've stabilized it. A permanent gateway that doesn't require a human sacrifice to maintain." Beside her stood Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the first and still the strongest of the bridges. Their appearances had continued to change. They looked mostly human, but their skin occasionally rippled with light just beneath the surface, and their eyes had become pools of radiance. "Can we use it to reach David?" Stone asked the question that had been burning inside him since that terrible day. "We already have," Paul replied, his voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that all the bridges developed over time. "Not physically, but we've made contact. He's unchanged but still himself in the ways that matter." "He holds a critical position now," Lisa added. "He exists at the exact boundary between our world, the realm of the Bright, and the Void. He sees everything. And what he sees is coming to warn us about," Mark finished. A chill ran down Stone's spine. "The Vex are coming back." "Not just the Vex," Emma said grimly. "They've gone to their masters. The Void Lords are preparing a direct assault." "How long do we have?" "A few months, maybe less," Paul replied. "But we won't face them alone." He gestured toward the stabilized portal. As Stone watched, it expanded slightly, and through it stepped a Bright unlike any he had seen before. This one was larger, its light more intense, its form more clearly defined, almost human in shape, but composed entirely of radiant energy. "Captain Stone," the being said, its voice resonating not through the air but directly in Stone's mind. "I am Luminar, emissary of the Council of Light. Your friend David speaks highly of you." Stone fought the urge to step back. You can talk to David?" "He is with us now in a manner of speaking," Luminar replied. "He has become something new, neither human nor Bright nor Void, but a bridge between all realms. Through him, we have learned much about humanity. And through him, Emma added, we've learned how to fight back when the Void Lords come. The next few months passed in a blur of preparation. All across the world, humans with the right neural patterns were identified and offered the choice to become bridges. Most accepted. The alternative, annihilation by the Void Lords, was a powerful motivator. Other humans worked to adapt Vex technology, combining it with the knowledge shared by the Bright to create new weapons, new defenses, new ways of perceiving reality. Stone found himself in charge of what they now called the Boundary Force, a military unit composed of both human fighters and Bright warriors, training together for the coming conflict. It was strange work, teaching beings of pure energy how to coordinate with flesh and blood soldiers, but it was necessary. They respect you, Tom Miller told him one evening as they reviewed training footage. Both sides. The humans because you've led them through hell already. The Bright because you don't fear them. Stone gave a short laugh. Who says I don't fear them? You're cautious around them, sure, Tom replied. But you don't show the fear that most people do. You look them in. Well, not eyes exactly, but you face them directly. They value that. Before Stone could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. They rushed to the command center, where Emma and the senior Bridges were already gathered around a large display. It's happening, Emma said without preamble. Multiple reality breaches detected. The void is coming through. The display showed points of darkness appearing around the globe. Dozens, then hundreds of tears in the fabric of reality, each one leaking shadows into the world. Earlier than we expected, Paul said, his light flickering with concern. They must have found a way to accelerate their preparations. Through one of the tiers, massive shapes began to emerge. Vex ships, but changed, corrupted by void energy. Behind them came larger, darker forms that the sensors struggled to track. The Void Lords, Luminar said. The bright emissary's light, dimming slightly at the sight. 3 of them. More than we anticipated. Stone looked at the display, at the overwhelming forces arrayed against Earth, and felt a moment of pure despair. Then he straightened his shoulders. We stick to the plan. Activate all bridges, deploy the boundary forces. This ends today, one way or another. The battle that followed would later be called the Convergence by some, the Illumination by others. It was fought not just with conventional weapons or even Vex technology, but with reality itself as the battlefield. Stone led a strike team to what had once been the Vex Command Center in Chicago, where the original portal still pulsed with balanced energy. According to the intelligence provided by David through the Bright, this spot had become a nexus, a point where all dimensions touched most closely. If we can amplify the portal, Emma had explained, we can create a reset point, a place where the rules of reality can be rewritten. It sounded like madness, but so did everything else these days. The strike team fought their way through waves of void-corrupted Vex soldiers. The Bright members of the team engaged directly with tendrils of pure darkness that reached through lesser tiers in reality, holding them back long enough for the humans to advance. Stone, Emma, and the 3 original Bridges finally reached the portal chamber. It looked much as it had when David had sacrificed himself. Except now the pulsing spot had grown, becoming a perfect sphere of neither light nor darkness. David? Stone called out, unsure if his friend could hear him. We're here. The sphere rippled, and for just a moment Stone thought he saw a face within it. David's face, but transformed, transcended. He hears you, Paul confirmed. He's been waiting for this moment. Emma quickly set up the equipment they had brought, a combination of modified Vex technology and devices created with knowledge from the Bright. This will amplify the portal's natural properties, she explained as she worked. If David can hold the center point, we can create a new equilibrium between the dimensions. Outside, the battle raged. Through their mental link with the Bright, they could sense the Void Lords pushing deeper into reality, their immense power warping everything around them. Ready, Emma announced finally. The amplifiers are set. The 3 Bridges took positions around the sphere, their interfaces glowing brightly as they placed their hands upon the equipment. Stone and Emma stepped back, watching as energy began to flow between the bridges and the portal. "Now!" Paul shouted, his voice echoing with the voices of countless bright. "David, now!" The sphere expanded suddenly, engulfing the three bridges. Stone moved to help them, but Emma held him back. "This is what has to happen," she said, tears in her eyes. They knew. They've always known. The sphere continued to grow, passing harmlessly through Stone and Emma, then through the walls of the building, expanding outward at an impossible speed. As it passed, it changed things. Not dramatically, but subtly. The tears in reality sealed themselves. The corruption of the void receded. Through the mental link that all humans now seemed to share at some level, Stone could sense the Void Lords screaming in rage as they were pushed back, forced to retreat from a reality that suddenly refused to accommodate their existence. When the sphere had expanded to encompass the entire planet, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then, softly at first but building rapidly, a sound like a crystal bell ringing filled the air. The sphere began to shrink again, condensing not back to its original size but into something new. Where the four bridges, David, Paul, Lisa, and Mark, had been, there now stood a single entity. It looked human in form, but its substance was something else entirely, a perfect balance of light and darkness, constantly flowing and shifting but never tipping toward either extreme. What are you?" Stone asked, his voice barely a whisper. The being smiled with four familiar faces somehow overlaid into one. "We are the fulcrum," it said with a voice that was both one and many. "The balance point. Neither bright nor void, but something new. Something that can exist only because of what humans are. The perfect bridges between extremes." Emma stepped forward cautiously. "Our friends, are they still?" "We are still ourselves," the fulcrum assured her. "But we are also more. And through us, reality has been adjusted. The Void Lords cannot enter this world directly now. The bright must follow certain rules to maintain their presence here. And humans." It paused, looking at Stone and Emma with eyes that held the wisdom of multiple dimensions. "Humans will become what they were always meant to be. Mediators, bridges, the species that stands at the center of all things." Stone felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the burden of fighting an impossible war suddenly replaced by something else. A purpose, a future. "So it's over? We won?" The fulcrum's smile turned sad. "The immediate threat is over. But this isn't an ending, James. It's a beginning. Everything changes from this moment. Earth is now the Nexus world, the center of a new reality where dimensions meet and balance each other. There will be challenges, adjustments, new threats, and new allies. But we'll face them together," Emma said firmly. "Yes," the fulcrum agreed. "Together. That is humanity's greatest strength, the ability to stand between extremes, to adapt, to change, to embrace both light and darkness without being consumed by either." As the fulcrum spoke, Stone became aware of changes happening across the planet. The strange sky was settling into something new, still Earth's familiar blue, but now occasionally shimmering with hints of other realities just beyond perception. The remaining Vex structures were transforming, their alien geometry softening into something that could serve as conduits between dimensions rather than harvesting centers. And most importantly, he could feel humanity changing. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually. The barriers between minds were becoming more permeable, allowing for a level of understanding and empathy that had never existed before, while still preserving the individual identity that made each person unique. The Vex had brought hell to Earth. Humanity had responded with something worse, at least from the perspective of the invaders. They had brought change, adaptation, evolution, the very qualities that the Void Lords and their servants feared most. "So what happens now?" Stone asked, echoing the question he had asked a month ago when everything seemed darkest. The fulcrum gestured to the world outside, a world transformed, a world reborn. "Now we build something new, something that has never existed before, a reality where all dimensions can touch without destroying each other, A universe where balance prevails. Everything changes, Emma said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Everything already has, the fulcrum replied. And it will keep changing. That's what makes it beautiful. Stone looked out at the new world, still familiar enough to be home, yet transformed into something greater than it had been before. The Vex had brought hell thinking to conquer and consume. Instead, they had triggered an evolution they could never have predicted. In trying to end humanity, they had instead helped it transcend. And now, everything had changed. Forever.